Princess stood alone on the observation deck of her father's warship. Through the massive window, she watched the blue planet grow larger and larger. Earth, the human, she had seen pictures of it before, but seeing it with her own eyes was different. It looked peaceful from up here. Small, fragile. They had ruled this part of the galaxy for 3,000 years. People were tall and strong, with silver skin that shimmered like starlight and violet eyes that could see in total darkness. They had conquered dozens of worlds. They had built an empire that stretched across 100 star systems. And now, for reasons she did not fully understand, her father had signed a peace treaty with these humans. Humans were nothing special. Everyone in the galaxy knew this. They were soft creatures with weak bodies. They lived for only 80 or 90 years, which was nothing compared to the 300 years a could expect. They had no claws, no fangs, no natural weapons of any kind. Their skin was thin and easily damaged. They could not see in the dark. They could not hear distant sounds. By every measure that mattered, they were one of the weakest species in the known universe. And yet her father had agreed to give them respect. More than respect, he had agreed to give them her. The treaty required a union between their peoples, a marriage, and because the humans were considered so far beneath the court had decided that would be the bride. Not her older sister who was being saved for a proper alliance. Not her younger sister who was too precious to waste. No, was the middle child, the quiet one, the one nobody paid much attention to. She was perfect for this meaningless marriage to a meaningless species. Her future husband was a man named. She had seen his picture in the treaty documents. He had black hair and dark eyes and a face that seemed neither handsome nor ugly, just ordinary. He was a former soldier, she had been told, though what kind of soldier she did not know. Now he worked as a diplomat, helping to manage relations between Earth and the other species they had encountered. The delegation found the whole thing hilarious, could hear them laughing behind their hands whenever they discussed the wedding. A princess of the great empire married to a human, it was a joke, a waste, but it was also politically useful, so did what she was told. The wedding ceremony was brief and strange. Humans had different customs then and had agreed to follow her people's traditions instead of his own. He stood before her in simple dark clothing, his head slightly bowed, his hands clasped in front of him. When the priest asked if he would honor and protect his bride, he said yes in a quiet voice that barely carried across the room. Studied him during the ceremony. He was shorter than her by almost a full head. His shoulders were narrow, his build slim. He moved carefully, almost cautiously, as if he was afraid of bumping into things. When their eyes met, he gave her a small smile that seemed genuine but also sad, like he understood exactly what this marriage meant and did not blame her for not wanting it. After the wedding, they were given quarters in the eastern wing of the palace. The rooms were large and beautiful, filled with art and furniture. Walked through them slowly, touching nothing, looking at everything. He stopped at the window and stared out at the purple sky of the... "It is very beautiful here," he said. Did not know what to say to that, so she said nothing. The first weeks of their marriage were awkward and quiet, had her duties to attend to, meetings with advisors and appearances at court functions. Came with her when required and stood silently at her side. He never complained. He never demanded anything. He simply existed in her space, polite and unobtrusive. But slowly began to notice things about him. He learned her language with surprising speed. Within 3 weeks, he could hold a basic conversation. Within 6 weeks, he was reading literature. He studied every day, waking early to practice his pronunciation and staying up late to memorize new words. When she asked him why he worked so hard, he simply said, "I want to understand you." He remembered small things, how she liked her tea prepared, which flowers she preferred in her chambers, the fact that she hated the sound of bells and loved the smell of rain. He never made a show of this knowledge. He simply acted on it, quietly adjusting the world around her to make it more comfortable. He was patient in a way that confused her. When her advisors spoke over her in meetings, which they often did, waited until they were finished. Then he would turn to her and ask, "What do you think, Your Highness?" Not to challenge the advisors, not to make a point. He genuinely wanted to know her opinion. One evening, after a particularly long day of court politics, found herself sitting with him in their private garden. The stars were coming out, and the air was cool and pleasant. Was tending to a small plant he had brought from Earth, carefully watering its soil and adjusting its position to catch the morning light. "You are strange for a male," she said suddenly. He looked up at her, his dark eyes calm. "How so?" "You do not try to dominate, you do not try to prove your strength, you simply exist quietly." He smiled that small, sad smile again. "I am what I am, Your Highness." She watched him return to his plant. His hands were gentle, his movements precise. There was something almost hypnotic about the way he worked, the complete focus he gave to this tiny living thing. "My brother says humans are violent creatures," she said. "He says your history is full of war and death." Did not look up. "That is true." "Then why are you so gentle?" He was quiet for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was soft. "Because I have seen what violence does, and I have decided that I would rather grow things than destroy them." Did not know what to make of that answer. But later that night, as she lay in her bed listening to the silence of the palace, she found herself thinking about it. About him. About the way his eyes had looked when he said those words. There was something there, something hidden beneath the surface, but she could not see it clearly, and she did not know if she wanted to. She told herself it did not matter. He was just a human, harmless and weak and temporary. In 100 years he would be dust and she would still be young. She closed her eyes and let sleep take her. She did not notice that never truly slept, that his eyes tracked every shadow, every sound, every movement in the darkness, that even in rest some part of him was always watching. Always waiting. 6 months passed and found herself growing used to her human husband. He was easy to live with. He made no demands, caused no problems, and required almost no attention. He was like a piece of furniture that happened to breathe. Pleasant to look at, useful in certain situations, but ultimately unremarkable. Or so she thought. The first thing she noticed was his knowledge of the palace. She discovered this by accident one afternoon when she took a wrong turn and found herself in an unfamiliar corridor. Before she could call for a servant, appeared at her elbow. "The east gallery is through the next door," he said quietly. "Then left at the fountain and you will be back in familiar territory." She stared at him. "How do you know that? You have been here only 6 months." "I like to walk," he said simply. "I have walked every corridor in this palace, some of them many times." Later, she asked one of her guards how long it had taken him to learn the palace layout. The guard, a veteran of 20 years, admitted that he still got lost sometimes in the older sections. Had memorized the entire palace in 6 months. She began to watch him more carefully after that, and the more she watched, the more she saw. He knew the patrol schedules of every guard in the palace, not because anyone had told him, but because he had observed them. He knew which doors were locked at which hours. He knew which windows could be opened and which were sealed. He knew where the servants kept their keys and where the security stations were located. When they walked together through the palace, he always positioned himself in specific ways. At first, she thought it was random. Then she realized he was always between her and the nearest exit, always able to see anyone approaching from any direction, always within arm's reach of her but never crowding her space. It was subtle, so subtle that she had missed it for months, but once she saw it, she could not stop seeing it. One day, an ambassador arrived from the collective. They were a dangerous species, known throughout the galaxy for their assassins and spies. They were tall and thin, with gray skin and eyes like black pools. They moved silently and smiled too often. The ambassador was named, and he made uncomfortable. He stood too close when they spoke. His eyes lingered on her in ways that felt wrong, and he had brought a large group of attendants with him, far more than a simple diplomatic visit required. During the welcome ceremony, noticed watching with unusual intensity. Her husband stood in his usual place, quiet and unmoving, but something was different. His body was relaxed, but his eyes were not. They tracked every movement they made, every gesture, every glance. That night found standing at the window of their chambers, staring out at the darkness. "You do not like the ambassador," she said. "No. Why?" He was quiet for a moment. "His attendants are not servants. They move like hunters. They watch the guards instead of the decorations. 2 of them have concealed weapons under their robes." Felt a chill run down her spine. "How can you possibly know that?" He turned to look at her, and for just a moment she saw something strange in his eyes. Something hard and cold and ancient. Then it was gone, replaced by his usual gentle expression. "I notice things," he said simply. She wanted to ask more, but something stopped her. Instead, she asked a different question. "You were a soldier, what kind?" "The quiet kind." "What does that mean?" He walked to a chair and sat down, his movements slow and careful. There are many kinds of soldiers. Some fight in large battles with tanks and ships and thousands of troops. Some guard important places and important people. And some, he paused, choosing his words carefully. Some do work that is never spoken about, work that happens in shadows, in silence, in places where no one is watching. You were one of those. For 8 years. Sat down across from him. And what did you do in those 8 years? I solved problems. What kind of problems? He met her eyes, and again she saw that flash of something cold. The kind that could not be solved any other way. She did not ask any more questions that night. The next day she requested military records from Earth. The files arrived within hours, transmitted through secure channels. She opened them expecting to find answers. Instead, she found black bars, redacted text, classified information, page after page of nothing, interrupted by occasional fragments that made no sense on their own. Deployment locations with no dates, mission types with no details, awards and commendations with no explanations. The few pieces she could read mentioned something called special operations. They mentioned survival training, advanced combat techniques, and psychological evaluation scores that were off the charts. They mentioned deployments to countries she had never heard of and conflicts that did not appear in any history she could find. At the bottom of the final page, there was a single note from the human military command. Asset status, retired, threat assessment, extreme, recommended handling, caution advised. Read that note 3 times. Then she closed the file and sat in silence for a long time. That evening, her brother arrived for a visit. He had just returned from a tour of human space, and he was full of opinions. They are savages, he declared, packing around sitting room. Their history is nothing but blood. They kill each other constantly over the most ridiculous things. Territory, resources, religious beliefs. They even killed each other over the color of their skin. Can you imagine, judging someone's worth based on pigmentation? Said nothing. She was watching who sat quietly in the corner, tending to one of his plants. They are barely civilized, continued. The only reason they have not destroyed themselves is pure luck. They came very close, you know, several times. They built weapons capable of ending all life on their planet, and they nearly used them. But they did not use them, said softly. Only because they were afraid. They are cowards at heart, weak and afraid and violent. You are lucky your husband is so passive. A proper human male would be dangerous. Looked up from his plant. His expression was mild, pleasant, empty of any reaction to words. He caught Sci's eye and smiled gently, then returned to his work. After left, sat alone with her thoughts. She watched the stars through the window and thought about what she had learned. Her husband was not passive. He was not weak. He was something else entirely. Something that wore gentleness like a mask. Something that watched and waited and remembered everything. She thought about his eyes in that brief moment when the mask had slipped. The coldness there, the patience, the complete absence of fear. What was he waiting for? And what would happen when he stopped waiting? She did not know. But for the first time since her marriage, she found herself looking at her human husband with something other than pity or indifference. She looked at him with curiosity. And just a little bit of fear. The Harvest Festival was the largest celebration of the year. For 3 days, the palace filled with music and laughter and thousands of guests from across the empire. Every noble family sent representatives. Every allied species sent ambassadors. The halls were decorated with flowers and lights, and the air smelled of exotic foods and expensive perfumes. Hated it. She hated the crowds and the noise and the endless stream of people who wanted to talk to her without actually listening to anything she said. She hated the way the other nobles looked at her, with pity in their eyes because of her human husband. She hated the way they whispered behind her back. By the second night, she was exhausted. She excused herself from the main celebration early, claiming a headache, and retreated to her private chambers. Offered to come with her, but she told him to stay and represent them at the festival. He nodded and let her go without argument. She walked alone through the quiet corridors, away from the music and the laughter. The guards at their posts bowed as she passed. Servants hurried by with trays of food and drink. Everything seemed normal. Her chambers were dark when she arrived. She did not bother to turn on the lights. She simply walked to her favorite chair by the window and sat down, letting the silence wash over her. For a long moment, she just breathed. The quiet was wonderful. The darkness was peaceful. She closed her eyes and felt the tension begin to leave her body. Then she heard it. A soft sound, almost nothing, the whisper of fabric against stone, the faintest shift in the air. She opened her eyes. A figure stood in the middle of her room. It had not been there a moment ago. It was tall and thin, wrapped in dark clothing that seemed to absorb the light. Its face was hidden behind a mask. In its hand, it held a weapon she did not recognize. Opened her mouth to scream. She never got the chance. The figure moved impossibly fast. One moment it was across the room, the next it was right in front of her. She saw the weapon rising toward her face. And then something happened. A shape came out of the darkness, silent, fast, so fast that eyes could not follow it. One moment the assassin was about to kill her, the next moment the assassin was falling, his neck bent at an impossible angle, his weapon clattering uselessly to the floor. Stood where the assassin had been. He had not made a sound. Stared at him, her heart pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. He was still wearing his formal clothes from the festival. His hair was still neatly combed. He did not even seem to be breathing hard. "How?" she started to say. He held up one hand, silencing her. His head turned slowly, scanning the room. His body was completely still, but something about his stillness was different now. It was not the passive quiet of a gentle man. It was the stillness of a predator waiting to strike. A second figure materialized from the shadows near the door. Another assassin, this one holding a different weapon, some kind of energy device that hummed with power. The assassin raised the weapon. Moved. Could not describe what she saw. It was not fighting as she understood it. There were no dramatic movements, no displays of strength or skill. Simply stopped being in one place and started being in another. The assassin fired but was not there. He was behind the assassin now, and his hands did something quick and precise, and the assassin collapsed without making a sound. Two bodies on the floor, two elite killers defeated in seconds. Stood motionless, his back to her. He was listening, she realized, listening for more. A third assassin dropped from the ceiling. This one was faster than the others, better prepared. It had seen what could do, and it adjusted. It came in low and fast, blades in both hands, moving with the deadly grace of a trained killer. For one terrible moment, thought it would succeed. Then turned around. And she saw his eyes. They were not the eyes of her husband. They were not gentle or kind or sad. They were empty, cold, ancient. They were the eyes of something that had been hunting and killing since before civilization existed, something that had learned patience over millions of years of evolution. Something that did not feel fear because fear was for prey, and this thing had never been prey. The third assassin saw those eyes and hesitated, just for a heartbeat, just for a fraction of a second. It was enough. Did not kill this one. He simply moved, a blur of motion too fast to follow, and suddenly the assassin was on the ground, disarmed, a knee pressed against his spine. "Run," said, his voice was flat, empty. "Tell your masters what you saw here. Tell them what happens to anyone who threatens my wife." He let the assassin go. The assassin ran. Watched him disappear into the shadows. Then slowly he turned back too. The change was immediate. The coldness left his eyes. The tension left his body. He was her husband again, gentle and quiet and concerned. "Are you hurt?" he asked softly. She could not answer. She was staring at the two bodies on her floor. Two assassins, the best killers in the galaxy, dead in her private chambers, killed by a human, killed by her husband. "What are you?" she whispered. He walked toward her slowly, carefully, as if approaching a frightened animal. He knelt beside her chair and took her hand in his. His touch was warm and gentle. "I am your husband," he said. "I made a promise to protect you. I intend to keep it." But those were assassins, the best in the galaxy. No one can defeat an assassin. They were good, agreed, but they made a mistake. What mistake? He met her eyes, and for just a moment, she saw a ghost of that ancient coldness lurking beneath the surface. "They thought I was harmless." Stared at him, her hand was shaking in his grip. Her whole body was shaking. "You let the third one go," she said. "Why?" "Because you did not need me to kill him. The message has been sent, and I did not want more death in our home than necessary." She laughed then. It was a wild, uncontrolled sound, somewhere between hysteria and wonder. "You did not want more death. You just killed two of the deadliest assassins in the known galaxy without breaking a sweat, and you did not want more death." He smiled, that same small, sad smile she had come to know so well. "I told you once. I have seen what violence does. I would rather grow things than destroy them. But sometimes, to protect the things you want to grow, you must first pull out the weeds." He stood and offered her his hand. "Come, we should alert the guards. There will be questions." She took his hand and let him pull her to her feet. She was still shaking. She was still afraid. But beneath the fear, something else was growing. Understanding. She was beginning to understand what her husband truly was. And she was beginning to understand that she had never been safer in her entire life. In the days that followed the assassination attempt, could not stop thinking about what she had seen. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw his face in that moment when the mask had fallen away. Those cold, ancient eyes, that terrible stillness, the way he had moved through 3 trained killers like they were nothing. She needed to understand. She needed to know what her husband truly was. She summoned her chief intelligence analyst, a named consul who had spent his entire career studying alien species. He arrived in her private study with a stack of data tablets and a nervous expression. "You want to know about humans?" he said. It was not a question. "I want to know everything." Sat down across from her and was quiet for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was careful. "Your Highness, what I am about to tell you may change the way you see your husband. It may change the way you see his entire species. Are you certain you want to hear it?" "Tell me." He nodded and activated his data tablet. "We have studied humans for many years. At first, we dismissed them just as everyone else did. They seemed weak, unremarkable, easy to ignore, but the more we learned, the more concerned we became." Concerned. Humans are not what they appear to be. He pulled up an image on his tablet. It showed a strange creature running across a grassy plain. "This is an antelope, a prey animal from Earth. It can run at speeds of nearly 100 kilometers per hour. It is one of the fastest land animals on the planet." He pulled up another image, a human standing upright in the same grassland. "This is a human, maximum running speed perhaps 30 or 40 kilometers per hour, much slower than the antelope. And yet humans hunted antelopes successfully for hundreds of thousands of years. Do you know how?" Shook her head. "They followed them." His voice was quiet. "They did not try to catch them in a single sprint. They simply followed, hour after hour, day after day. The antelope would run away and the human would keep walking. The antelope would stop to rest and the human would appear on the horizon. Eventually, the antelope would collapse from exhaustion and heat and the human would simply walk up to it and kill it." He met her eyes. "Humans are pursuit predators, Your Highness. They evolved not for moments of explosive violence, but for persistence, for patience, for the long game. They are the only species on their planet that can run for entire days without stopping. Their bodies are designed for endurance, not speed. And their minds," he paused, "their minds are designed for something even more impressive." "What?" "Planning, waiting, remembering." He pulled up another image, this one showing a primitive human camp. "Other predators hunt when they are hungry. Humans plan hunts days or weeks in advance. They remember the patterns of their prey. They create tools. They work together in groups. They share information across generations. A human child learns from the experiences of ancestors who died 100 years before it was born. Thought about memorizing every corridor in the palace, every guard schedule, every exit. But they seem so gentle," she said. "My husband tends plants, he speaks softly, he has never once raised his voice to me." "That is perhaps the most frightening thing about them," leaned forward. "Humans do not display aggression the way other species do. They contain it, they control it. They build entire civilizations based on suppressing their violent instincts. Art, philosophy, law, religion, all of these are human inventions designed to channel their natural aggression into less destructive forms. And when those controls fail," was silent for a long moment. Then he pulled up a series of images that made blood run cold. War, endless, terrible war, cities burning, bodies piled in trenches, weapons that could destroy entire planets, machines designed for nothing but killing. "Humans have spent their entire existence fighting each other," said. "They have created weapons capable of ending all life on their world, bombs that could turn their entire planet to ash, poisons that could kill every living thing, and they have come very close to using them, multiple times. But they did not use them. No, they chose not to. He looked at her with something like wonder in his eyes. "That is what makes them so remarkable, Your Highness. They have the capacity for destruction on a scale that terrifies even us, and they have chosen restraint. They look into the abyss, and they decide to build gardens instead." Thought about's garden, the way he touched each plant with such care. "Your husband," continued, "is what humans call a special operations soldier. These are humans who have been trained to operate alone in hostile territory, to survive anything, to kill without being seen. They are the best of the best, selected from millions and trained until they become something more than ordinary humans." Something more. The average human is already dangerous. A special operations soldier is. He searched for the right word. They are weapons that look like people. They can kill with their bare hands. They can survive for weeks without food or water. They can endure pain that would kill a, and the most dangerous ones, like your husband, have learned to hide what they are behind a mask of gentleness. Remembered the assassination attempt, the way had moved, the way his eyes had changed. "The gentle ones are the most dangerous," she said softly. "Yes," nodded, "because they have learned to control what they are. The violence is always there, Your Highness, always waiting, but they have chosen to keep it leashed. They only release it when they must. And when they release it..." Pulled up one final image. It was a graph showing the success rates of various galactic assassin guilds. They were at the top with a 94% success rate. Beside it was another number. "This is the survival rate of humans targeted by assassins," said. "Specifically, humans who have received special operations training." The number was 67%. "2 out of every 3 survive," whispered. "And the ones who survive usually kill the assassins who came for them." Turned off his tablet. "Your Highness, I must be honest with you. When we first learned of your marriage, we thought it was a joke, a waste of a princess on a worthless species. But now, knowing what we know," he hesitated, "you may be the safest person in this palace, perhaps the safest person in the Empire. Because anyone who tries to hurt you will have to go through a human who has already killed more dangerous things than they can imagine." After left, sat alone in her study for a long time. She thought about everything she had learned, about pursuit predators and persistence, about violence contained and controlled, about weapons that looked like gentle men who tended gardens and remembered how she liked her tea. She thought about's eyes in that moment when the mask had fallen. And she realized something important. She was not afraid of her husband. She never had been, not really. What she felt was not fear, it was awe. The same awe she felt when she looked at the stars or stood before a great storm. Her husband was something extraordinary, something ancient and powerful and terrible, and he had chosen to use all of that power to protect her. She stood and walked to the window. Outside, she could see in his garden, kneeling in the dirt, carefully transplanting a flower from one pot to another. A weapon that chose to grow things instead of destroy them. A predator that chose to be gentle. A human. For the first time since her marriage, smiled. The collective demanded an audience 3 days after the assassination attempt. They wanted an apology. They wanted reparations. They wanted the head of the human who had killed 2 of their elite operatives. The court was in chaos. The nobles were terrified of starting a war with the military advisors warned that the collective had thousands of assassins ready to deploy. The diplomats urged caution and compromise. Everyone agreed that the safest path was to give the what they wanted. Everyone except. She sat in her chambers on the morning of the audience, watching prepare for the day. He moved with his usual quiet efficiency, adjusting his simple clothing, combing his hair, checking his appearance in the mirror. He looked exactly like what everyone believed him to be. A harmless human, a trophy husband, a joke. "They want me to apologize," she said. "I know. They want me to hand you over to them. I know. The court thinks I should do it. They say it is the only way to avoid war." Turned to face her. His expression was calm, accepting. "If that is what you need to do, I understand. I knew what I was doing when I killed those assassins. I knew there might be consequences. You would let me hand you over. You would let them kill you. I would rather die than see you hurt because of something I did." Stared at him for a long moment. Then she stood and walked to him. She took his face in her hands and looked into his eyes, those gentle, dark eyes that hid so much. "No," she said firmly. I will not hand you over, I will not apologize, and I will not let the threaten my people ever again. He blinked, Your Highness. My name is, we have been married for nearly a year. I think you can call me by my name. A small smile crossed his face. Come, we have an audience to attend. The throne room was packed when they arrived. Nobles lined the walls in their finest clothes. Guards stood at attention by every door. At the center of the room, on a raised platform, sat the ambassador. His name was, and he looked even more arrogant than remembered. His black eyes swept across the crowd with contempt. Walked toward him with at her side. She could hear the whispers as they passed. Poor princess, foolish girl. She's going to start a war over a human. She ignored them all. Watched her approach with a smile that showed too many teeth. Princess, how kind of you to finally receive us. I trust you are ready to discuss the proper compensation for the loss of our operatives. There will be no compensation, said. The whispers stopped. The entire room went silent. Smile flickered. I beg your pardon. Your operatives entered my private chambers with intent to kill me. They were stopped. That is the end of the matter. Stopped by this creature. His black eyes turned to. He looked the human up and down with open disgust. This small, weak, pathetic creature, he murdered 2 of our elite. He must face justice. He defended his wife. That is not murder. That is duty. Rose from his seat. He was tall, even by standards, and he used his height to try to intimidate. Do you have any idea who you are dealing with, Princess? The Collective has assassins on every world in this sector. We can reach anyone, anywhere, at any time. If you do not give us satisfaction, we will take it ourselves. Stepped forward. His movement was small, almost invisible, but suddenly he was between and the ambassador. His expression was mild. His posture was relaxed. He looked completely harmless. I have a question, he said quietly. Sneered down at him. And what could a human possibly want to ask? The third assassin, the one I released, did he deliver my message? Something changed in his face. Just for a moment, saw uncertainty in those black eyes. He told us what you did, said slowly. He told us you killed 2 of our best in seconds. We do not believe him. You are just a human. Humans are weak. Nodded thoughtfully. I see. He was quiet for a moment, then he looked up at, and something in his eyes changed. The warmth faded. The gentleness disappeared. What looked out at the ambassador was ancient and cold and utterly without mercy. It was the gaze of a predator that had hunted across the grasslands of Earth for 100,000 years. A predator that did not chase its prey, but simply followed, patient and relentless, until there was nowhere left to run. Let me tell you about humans, said softly. We hunted mammoths with sticks. We survived ice ages that killed nearly every other species on our planet. We walked out of Africa with nothing but stone tools and spread to every corner of our world. We tamed fire. We tamed the atom. We walked on our moon within a century of learning to fly. He took a step toward. The ambassador did not move, but something in his posture shifted. He was afraid, realized. The most powerful diplomat of the deadliest species in the sector was afraid of a small, soft-spoken human. We developed weapons that could destroy our entire planet, continued. Bombs that could turn cities to ash in seconds, poisons that could kill every living thing on Earth, and we chose not to use them, not because we are weak, because we understand what we are capable of and we have learned to control it. Another step took a step back. Your assassins were good. They were fast and quiet and deadly, but they made a mistake. They thought I was harmless because I am gentle. They forgot that gentleness is a choice. The most dangerous predators on Earth are not the ones that roar and charge. They are the ones that watch and wait and remember. Stopped directly in front of. He had to look up to meet the ambassador's eyes, but somehow, impossibly, it was who looked small. I am the product of millions of years of evolution, said. My ancestors hunted things bigger than you by following them until they collapsed from exhaustion. My species has fought wars that killed hundreds of millions of our own people. I have personally ended more lives than your 3 assassins combined, and I let the 3rd one go because I wanted you to know what happens if you ever threaten my wife again. He smiled. It was not a pleasant smile. So here is my message to the collective. Leave us alone. Send no more assassins. Make no more threats, because if you come for her again, I will not stop with 3. I will find every assassin you send. I will find the people who sent them. And I will follow them to the ends of the galaxy if I have to, because that is what humans do. We follow, and we never ever stop. The silence in the throne room was absolute. Stared at for a long moment. His face was pale, his black eyes wide. Then, without a word, he turned and walked out of the room. His attendants followed, moving quickly, almost running. Watched them go, then she took his hand in hers. "Well," she said softly, "that was impressive." The coldness faded from his eyes. The gentle warmth returned. He squeezed her hand and smiled his small, sad smile. "I hope I did not overstep." "You were perfect." That night they sat together in his garden. The stars were bright above them, and the flowers he had planted filled the air with sweet scent. He had grown roses from earth, somehow convincing them to bloom in alien soil. They were red and beautiful and completely out of place, just like him. "Thank you," she said, "for everything." "I made a promise," he replied. "I intend to keep it." She leaned against his shoulder and looked up at the stars. "I think I understand you now. Humans, I mean, I think I finally understand." "And what do you understand?" "You came from a world that tried to kill you every day. Ice and fire, plague and famine, predators and disasters, and you survived all of it. Not by being the strongest or the fastest, but by being the most stubborn, the most patient, the most persistent." She turned to look at him. "You are gentle because you choose to be, because you have looked at all the violence you are capable of and you have decided that you would rather grow things. But the violence is always there, always waiting, ready to protect what you love." He was quiet for a long moment. Then he smiled, and it was a real smile, warm and genuine. "Yes," he said simply, "that is exactly what we are." She kissed him then for the first time since their wedding. It was gentle and soft and full of promise. Above them, the stars burned on, indifferent to the small dramas of mortal creatures. But in that garden, surrounded by flowers that should not have been able to grow on an alien world, a princess and her human husband had found something rare and precious. Understanding and love.